She told him in plain words that she wished he'd been hit by a car. He was 19 before he found out why she hated him so much. She wasn't his sister. She was his mother. 4 stories today about family truths that came out years too late, and the damage that sat quietly underneath them the whole time. He's 19 now, and he recently learned that his 35-year-old sister, the same sister who has despised him for as long as he can remember, is actually his biological mother. He'd never had the faintest idea growing up. He used to quietly explain her hatred to himself as some kind of fallout from his birth. Maybe money got tighter, maybe plans changed, maybe he'd simply become an easy target for whatever resentment she was carrying. The truth was worse than a theory. When he was 7 or 8, his parents, biologically his grandparents, had to cut contact between them entirely because of how openly hostile she was. She called him names constantly. If he sat too close to her, she'd shove him away and swear at him to get lost. She told him repeatedly that he should leave the family, that nobody wanted him, that he was a disgusting freak. She even tried convincing his aunts and uncles to lock him out of the house whenever his parents weren't home, hoping he'd simply run away. When they refused and told his parents instead, and his parents finally confronted her, her response was that everyone's lives would be easier if he ran into traffic. Well, that was the end of any direct contact. But the hostility never really stopped. It just moved to the background, filtered through overheard conversations between adults, comments from siblings who didn't know he could hear them. Nobody in all those years ever mentioned that she was his biological mother. The moment she found out he'd learned the truth, she told him she hated him, that he never deserved to exist, that she wanted to see him broken and mangled. She said she was repulsed just looking at him, that she owed him nothing, and that if he wanted to do everyone a favor, he could go kill himself. His parents were devastated when they found out he knew. He now suspects something traumatic may have happened to her around the time he was conceived. Some explanation, even an awful one, that might make sense of the intensity of it all. But he has no way to actually know, and neither, as far as he can tell, do the parents who raised him. They'd always planned to eventually tell him the full truth, but the sheer hostility she'd shown him over the years kept giving them pause, worried about how damaging it would be to learn he was hated this deeply by the woman who gave birth to him. He still calls his parents, and his siblings. Some extended family find that strange, given what he now knows, but changing those words has never felt like an option to him. What he's struggling with most isn't anger at the people who raised him for keeping the secret. It's the simple, heavy fact of knowing exactly how much the woman who gave birth to him despises his existence, and not knowing what to do with that information at 19 years old. That was a truth kept hidden for years. This next story is about a mother who never bothered hiding anything at all. She simply walked away. Twice. And expected forgiveness to be waiting whenever she decided to come back. She's 22 now. Her mother was 42 the day she walked out. She and the woman's father were already separated by then. Very early one morning, while she was asleep at her mom's house, her mother carried her out to the car, drove her to her father's, and beat on the door until he woke up. 2 packed bags, 5 years old, and that was it. She wouldn't see her mother again for 16 years. Life with her dad was genuinely good for a while. But by the time she was 9, he started acting erratic, not himself. Her mother's own parents were still involved in her life and tried repeatedly to help, informing her mother of what was happening, hoping she'd step in. She refused every time. By the time Child Protective Services finally got involved, after dozens of reports from her grandparents, she was already 14. And her father's situation had become genuinely unsafe. Her mother was contacted again. She still wanted nothing to do with any of it. Her grandparents took over custody. Her father passed away 3 years ago, after years of struggling with whatever had derailed him. She never did find out what triggered it, only that he stopped being the dad she'd known for her first 9 years of life. It's been a hard road, but she counts herself lucky to have had family in her corner the whole way through. Then, this past February, her mother moved her entire new family, a husband, an uncertain number of kids, a whole second life, into the same town as her grandparents. Her grandparents made it clear to her mother that she doesn't get to simply reappear after abandoning her granddaughter twice with zero concern for her safety and expect anything to be fine between them.
Her mother claimed she wanted to make amends, but needed their help to do it. They told her she'd need to speak to their granddaughter directly first. She agreed to one meeting and came away from it with no real answers. Her mother offered no explanation for why she'd left, showed little sign of actually caring, and delivered the line about it being the most difficult decision of her life in a way that didn't remotely land as sincere. She does believe her mother has regrets. She just suspects the biggest one is losing the relationship entirely, not the years of absence that caused it. She has no interest in a relationship with her mother's new family, including her half-siblings. She's aware they're innocent in all of this, and it doesn't change how she feels. Her mother has shown up unannounced at her grandparents' house twice since, trying to force introductions she wanted no part of, and once tried using her grandmother's phone to call her directly, until she was caught.
Last week, an angry message arrived over social media, accusing her of refusing to build a relationship with her mother's do-over family, along with a demand that they meet again, alone this time, without her grandparents present. Nothing about the situation has actually changed. Her mother didn't care when she was 5 or 10, and there's little evidence she genuinely cares now either. The only real difference is that the disregard is more visible these days. Family disappointment doesn't always come from something this heavy. Sometimes it just comes from a truly baffling jar of mayonnaise. A 33-year-old woman had a doctor's appointment, specifically to talk through some recent weight gain, hormone levels, and lab work. She and her boyfriend of 3.5 years live separately and keep their finances apart. Their relationship had already been cooling off for a while. Physical affection down to roughly once a month, though she was clear that her own desire wasn't the issue. He still claimed to be attracted to her, while also dropping the occasional comment like maybe she'd find exercise easier than she thought, or that she should really take better care of herself. He came home that same evening from her appointment, visibly pleased with himself, holding a gift, a full-size jar of mayonnaise. Not flowers, not her favorite snack, mayonnaise. When she asked why, he explained he genuinely only eats Miracle Whip himself, since regular mayonnaise is so bad for you. She pointed out the obvious follow-up, then why buy her the thing he considers unhealthy on the exact day she'd gone to discuss her own health? He called her ungrateful, said she was overreacting over a condiment. She wasn't so sure the condiment itself was even the real issue. It was the timing, stacked directly on top of months of pointed little comments about her eating and her body, that made the whole gesture land less like a joke and more like a targeted jab dressed up as a present. Even the people reacting to her story couldn't quite agree on what the gift was even supposed to mean. Some read it as a straightforward insult, implying she should be eating celery instead. Others pointed out that gifting mayonnaise, of all things, reads almost like the opposite message. Eat whatever you want, including something fattening. Whether he meant it as a dig or just landed on the most confusing possible gift by pure accident, the consensus in the comments leaned toward one simple piece of advice: leave. Less because the gift itself was cruel, and more because a man who can't manage to make a coherent joke, mean or otherwise, probably isn't worth staying for. Last one. This is about a child who got quietly pushed aside once and then punished for saying so when it almost happened all over again. Back in elementary school, his parents took in a family friend's child for 6 months while things fell apart in that child's own home. His parents poured themselves into making sure that kid felt welcome and supported through an obviously difficult time. He, meanwhile, got quietly lost in the shuffle. Promises made to him got forgotten. Plans got canceled last minute without explanation. Neither parent ever seemed to have time for him, let alone both at once. They addressed it with him twice. The first time, about a month in, he was told it wouldn't last much longer and praised for being understanding about it. The second time, he was told plainly that this was simply how things needed to be, that he didn't carry the same trauma the other child was dealing with, and that he needed to be a young man and set his own feelings aside while his parents focused elsewhere. Eventually, the child went home to their own family, and that chapter closed. What it left behind, though, was a strong pull in his parents toward fostering and adoption, a way to have more kids than they'd been able to have on their own, with hope that some placements might eventually become permanent. They began the approval process and cleared most of it without issue. One of the final steps required each family member to be interviewed individually. In his interview, he told the caseworker plainly that he didn't want his family to foster. He explained what had happened with the family friend's child and said he didn't want to come last over and over behind a rotating list of foster and adopted kids. When asked whether he'd be welcoming toward foster children in the home, his honest answer, as he understood the question at the time, amounted to not if it meant losing his own parents' attention the way he already had once. Looking back now as an adult, he recognizes that whatever went wrong the first time was on his parents' choices, not on the child they'd taken in. At the time, though, that's genuinely how it felt to him. His answer was enough to get the fostering application rejected. His parents asked what had gone wrong and were apparently told, at least in some form, what he'd said. He still doesn't know the exact wording relayed back to them, only that they've resented him for it ever since, never fully forgiving him or trying to understand why a young child might have felt that way after already living through it once. The relationship between them has only grown more distant with time. Just last month, they told him he'd selfishly robbed them of the chance to grow their family and do more good in the world. 4 stories. 4 different kinds of family truths that arrived far too late to undo the damage already done. Which one hit you hardest? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe for a new story every day. See you tomorrow.